trying new blades, first time. Let's see how it goes. This stuff sells really well. It's kind of crazy that you can stab through the shell with a toothpick. They look like little brains. I feel more creative if I give myself a permission structure. What if you allowed yourself to try something you've always wanted to try, and it doesn't matter how big of a mess it makes? What if we could replace all plywood with bamboo plywood? Well, why hasn't that happened? Hey Shane, just struggling over here, trying out the new bench press. This is the latest project. I've always been interested in gym equipment, and I had all these leftover Douglas fir beams. We're going to talk about those later. And this was super easy and surprisingly low cost. I mean, I only had to buy the big beam, the 6x12. And for a 6 foot length, it's probably about like $70. And the rest was just scrap I had lying around. Super easy construction. And then the one thing I kind of was a little extravagant on was getting all my weights powder coated. So I'm going to extend the patio by my bedroom, and that's where the outdoor gym will be. And that'll be the future home for this piece. But one of the things I really like about it is that it's relatively easy to move because it's in 3 pieces. So these Douglas fir beams are the material that has made me the most money over the last couple of years. It got started because I had a bunch of leftover pieces from the construction of this house. And this bench was one of the first things that I turned them into. And these were relatively small. I think these were 4x8s or something like that. Yeah, 4x8s. And I noticed that one of the cutoff pieces had this really tight grain. Looks a little tigery and a little orange for some people's taste, but I was able to make this bench out of just that one piece, and the video did well, and I got a lot of orders from people wanting these kind of organic shapes in seating. So I was curious, and I talked to the lumber yard about how much would it cost to get even thicker ones. This is a 6x12, so 5.5 inches thick and just about 11.25 wide. I'm able to get 10 to 12 foot versions of this for anywhere between $120 to $150. So pretty massive, substantial pieces of wood. And that's what I made the bench for the bench press out of. For the uprights, I used thinner pieces that were 4x12s. But the opportunity that I discovered was this relatively low cost, thick pieces of solid wood. When you carve them with the angle grinder and start to get these curves and shapes that are really flowy, you're creating something that, even though the material is cheap, isn't that common to see. A lot of people, when they're just at normal houses and stuff, they don't see pieces of woodworking or furniture where the material that started with was so thick that you could actually remove pieces and reveal curvy, sinewy kind of shapes. But this is construction lumber, so it'll often come with some checks and splinters and things like that. You can get a few different grades, and it's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes I'll get the cheaper grade and it actually comes out really nice. Sometimes I'll get the architectural grade and it's not that much better. So it takes a while to kind of figure out and work with your local lumber yard. This is also stuff that isn't typically in stock. So I call ahead to Parker Building Supply. I tell them what they want, they give me a price, and then it normally arrives to their lumber yard within like 2 to 5 days. So from a design standpoint, starting solid and then subtracting really opens up a lot of possibilities. And cost-wise, I mean, this chunk might just cost us about 20, 30 bucks. So super exciting stuff to work with, although you do need to get, really long lag screws and stuff like that to connect the pieces sometime. I also did a recent commission for a 14-foot long table, all out of 4x12s for the top, so super heavy. And woodworking wise, this project is so simple and easy, but I was able to get $6,000 for it because, well, we didn't have to ship it. It was a local sort of delivery situation. And there was a ton of value for the client in just having someone local that could acquire the materials, put together basic woodworking, and deliver it to site. So kind of a nice commission and a way to turn around inexpensive materials and create value for people. Now these stools were done with 6x6 cedar, not Douglas fir, and cedar is definitely more expensive, but the logic still applies where you get big chunks of wood, In this case, I had to glue them together and then carve out and get these nice kind of shapes. So these are my 3 bar stools. Each one's a little different. And that's gonna be an upcoming video on Homemade Modern soon. I've been doing DIY concrete stuff since day one, and this is kind of the latest incarnation of it. When I got started, there wasn't a lot of ready-to-go silicone molds. I had to kind of make my own. And now there's so many great options that you can just get from Temu or Amazon or a bunch of other online retailers. They last forever. I haven't worn out any of these. They're just super durable, they're easy to clean. And this is the latest collection where I've added really basic woodworkings. We're talking just taking your scraps and just like routing out a few edges to make little partial trays. And this stuff sells really well. I hardly ever advocate people making and selling things at crafts fairs and stuff like that. I tend to think it takes too long to do it. This is the exception, right? So to make a concrete tray like this, once you have the molds, which are about 10 to 20 bucks, and again, infinitely reusable, that's probably less than $1.50 of concrete and maybe 10 cents of pigment. If you can get scraps of hardwood, I mean, walnut's expensive if you buy big boards, but if you can get little scraps of it and then just like sand and polish them, you make these things that do extraordinarily well at farmers markets. I've sold these for like $60 to $70 each. They get used as like charcuterie trays, and it's just not that hard, and the stuff looks really nice. The other thing with concrete and pigments is you can get real subtle with the colors and just get these really high-end looking, subtle greens and browns and grays that kind of fit what people are willing to spend money on right now. And they always come out a little bit different unless you weigh out and measure it so precisely. But it's kind of easy to match the tones and style of what's popular at this time pretty quickly in your own home. Now, this is something I'm working on for a desk organizing system. And so I put little notches. I always have a lot of memory cards, so I like to make a little tray for the ones that I still haven't downloaded the footage off of yet. So I did a longer and slower video than what I usually do for these series of trays. And I go into quite a bit of depth on exactly how I mix them, what it should look like, and where I get the stuff. So I recently learned that there are specifically designed blades for angle grinders that can cut glass. And I got these really great bottles of tequila, which I finished. So I'm gonna try to see if I can cut them and turn them into little drinking glasses, and at the same time maybe have the top be used as a pendant light. So trying new blades, first time. Let's see how it goes. The challenge with working with glass bottles is holding them steady. So I'm gonna try the little sandbox approach first. And this is just to make a little bed that holds the bottle, not perfectly still, but still enough. So I have a little bit of a line in the pattern, so I'm just gonna try to cut right along that line. But space helmets first. Probably wanna get a little farther away and try to zoom in as much as you can. Let's see how this goes. So I heard that when you're cutting glass, a lot of the chipping and cracking that you can get is from the heat of all the friction from the blade building up. So some people suggest putting water into the bottles when you're cutting them so that it helps dissipate that heat. But honestly, I'm not seeing that much of a difference. I think it has more to do with how aggressive the blade is and how wobbly my hand is. I think that's where the chipping is coming from. So what I think I need now is a really fine grit on something that I can put into a Dremel tool and then just grind that inside edges. So the blade cuts really fast. And I've tried to cut glass with angle grinders before and tile cutting blades. It's definitely an improvement. It's not perfect though, right? And I would still need to grind particularly the inside edge of these glasses before I'd feel safe using them. Was a big improvement versus what I've tried, but still not all the way there, and still need a bit of finishing. The glass brick is where I really saw the improvement. To do a similar line probably took me 4 to 5 times the amount of time with the tile cutting blades. So great blades, inexpensive, but still don't know if they really create an advantage or open up like a new project type from them. So I'll keep them I'll keep playing with them, and I kind of want to try them on stone now, because if they cut glass this well, they might be pretty good for some of the harder rocks. So for today's beverage, we're doing coffee and cognac. Just because that's what we have on hand, and can always use a little more caffeine here in the early afternoon. Still rocking all the fellow stuff. It served me so well over the years, and I think it's actually one of the great design brands over the last 20 years is really Fellow. I think they've really changed the aesthetic of coffee. So my friend Dina gave me this cognac, which I don't normally drink a lot of cognac, but it's great. And it's great to add to coffee because it's got a little bit of sweetness to it. But to top it off, we're doing one of the more interesting things that I've tried recently, which is these walnut preserves. Now, these are black walnuts, not English walnuts. And you actually eat the shell, which sounds a little unhinged, but work with me here. So these are something I really like in an old fashioned. The syrup is a bit sweet, and it tastes similar, I think, to a date. Is probably what I would, give it as its closest comp. But check this out when we cut one open. So it cuts quite easy with a knife, and you can see there, shell and all. And so I just like these as a little garnish for kind of sweeter, whiskier drinks. Kind of crazy that you can stab through the shell with a toothpick. They look like little brains. All right, so Shane, what are we talking about today?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about creativity and new alternative building materials.
Gotcha. Are there any particular materials you're interested in?
Hempcrete, and then like mycelium plastic I've seen a lot of, and superwood.
Very familiar with hempcrete. Somewhat familiar with the mushroom stuff, which is interesting because you can grow it. I'm guessing these are things you've seen sort of online with like videos that are very like, this could solve this eco problem, and it's this great alternative because you don't. Okay, yeah, so this is an interesting topic because of the internet. I get asked about these things. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? So let's take our loaded coffee, and there you go, and have a chat. All right, cheers.
Happy Sunday. First off, that walnut was insane. It's kind of like a cherry. I've never tasted something like that.
Yeah, I think the walnut with like a Luxardo or one of those like fancy maraschino cherries would give you kind of like a peanut butter and jelly type vibe in a cocktail that could be memorable to say the least.
Yeah. All right, so creativity. I hear a lot of questions about creativity, like how do you get lightning to strike? Can you cultivate it? Is it something you can learn, or is it something you're born with? So what are your thoughts about cultivating creativity?
Yeah, whether or not you have creativity as an ability or you can learn it over time, I think those are pretty common themes for designers and people that do creative work. I tend to think it has to get separated into almost two topics, because often when people say that they want to learn to be more creative, they either mean one of two things, which are a little bit different. One, they mean that they want the world to see them as more creative, that they want the perception of them and their work to be as a creative person. And so they want the perception of creativity. The other kind of version of the same topic is the feeling of creativity, where how do I feel more free to do things that are not totally rational or completely predictable. So I think on one hand, people want it as like a light feeling of being, where they can be like, I sit down to this paper and I just have ideas flowing out of me, versus people being like, I want people to see my work as not being predictable and routine, but as sort of like nuanced and special and part of like my own individual uniqueness. So I tend to think that if you want the world to perceive you as creative, and I think it's fair to say that people look at me and they say, Ben is a creative person. I don't think that's necessarily from some sort of specific ability. I think it's because I do a lot of stuff. I think it has a lot to do with how much stuff I create more than how good it is or how novel any one piece is. And so I do think you can learn to make people see you as creative. I think that's actually the easiest one. So to create the perception that you are a creative person, that I think there's like a really clear path, because you can even start with like technical skills. The better I am at using tools, the more creative the world sees me at. And there's nothing creative about cutting a beam with a circular saw. There's nothing creative about standing there for 2 hours like an idiot sanding. That's not creative work. But in like knowing how to put those technical steps together, it improves the likelihood of you being seen as a creative person, because you have more abilities, you can package them into projects and keep going. In terms of the feeling, that's part that's like, I think a little bit harder. There's plenty of mornings when I wake up and I don't feel creative at all. And that tends to be when I have a whole bunch of things that I feel I absolutely have to do, and there's no wiggle room in how they have to be done. There's no expressive opportunity. It's just like, send this invoice, reply to these 500 emails, do this set of drawings so it can get approved by the client. Those don't feel like creative tasks. So for the feeling of creativity, one, I think it's carving out time where there is that flexibility to kind of wander and come up with new things. I tend to think thinking of it as an ability gives people that thing where they go, oh, I'm just not a creative person. Well, no, you might just be a very constrained person with a lot of responsibilities, or you might have some ideas, but you don't have the technical ability or the know-how to actually make them happen. So for being perceived as a creative, I think skill building, when you first started editing videos, you weren't good at the software. No. So you can do more creative stuff with video, the better you know Premiere, right?
Yes. It started out being very rote and with a lot of friction. And I think that people sequester creativity to specific crafts and the arts, or this frictionless, euphoric stream of flowing ideas. Creativity is really just problem solving. That's a creative kind of thinking. And sometimes that process has a lot of friction and doesn't feel euphoric, and I've woken up on a Sunday and ideas are just flowing. It comes kind of in the gutter, and it's often problem solving, even if the field is not an art or a craft.
And the reason why I don't like creativity as an ability, strength is an ability, right? And it's measurable. If someone can bench press 300 pounds versus 200 pounds, that is a measurable ability of strength. Creativity is more kind of observed after the fact. And we don't know what other options that person considered in making a piece of creative work. So it might just be that a person that's seen as creative might not be this person that thought of all these other options and ways of doing it. It might just be that they made the first thing. And this happens to me all the time. I'll get told, oh, you're so creative, this project, I haven't seen something like that. And they imply that as if it came about from this intense thinking and focusing of me to look at all the options and come up with that one. Often it was just that I just said, F it, I'm gonna make the first thing that comes to mind. And if I get a lot of first things that I made that came to mind over time, people are like, oh, Ben makes all this different stuff. So I think there's actually kind of a looseness and productiveness, or a focus on just getting a lot of stuff done often creates that, particularly if your area of where you work isn't narrowly defined, right? If I was just making traditional chairs, and I just made one after the other with slight variations, I'd probably get seen more as a craftsperson than as a creative person.
Totally.
But it's funny too, and again, tying back to our conversation last week with AI, I think creative is going to be this kind of human-specific thing. It's the new authentic. Mm-hmm. Remember how authenticity was oh, for your social media, you just need to be authentic. Mm-hmm. And then there's manufactured authenticity. I think creative is similar in a lot of ways, where it gets thrown around very loosely. And it's important to a lot of people, but without really putting their finger on why it's important or what's important about it. But I think it's going to come more and more as being a kind of human expressive overlay to things.
It's funny, you watch people on the internet and you can kind of think creativity is an identity rather than sort of a practice. And as you compare yourself to people on the internet who seem to be very prolific, where you trip up is you start to tell yourself, I'm not that kind of creative, or I don't have that kind of output, so I'm not creative. And so rather than berating yourself with comparative mindset, trying to reframe how you think of yourself and how you think of creativity could be the first step.
Right. So if I wake up and I don't feel like particularly inspired to do something, but I know that if I can find that feeling and then chase it, I'll have a much better day than if I don't. So if I was to think of like how to make myself feel more creative and then hopefully produce stuff that is in line with that, there's actually like, I think very basic things you can do is one, I feel more creative when I walk into a workshop that's organized and tidy than I walk into one that's a mess. I feel more creative if I give myself a permission structure, right? So if I was going to try a new project, because I just had like a little glimpse of an idea, if I have the approach where whatever you do, don't make a mess and don't waste materials, that might stop me from experimenting as wildly. Whereas if I'm kind of stuck and I could almost ask myself questions or give myself permissions, and I could do something like, okay, you don't know what you want to do, but what if you allowed yourself to try something you've always wanted to try, and it doesn't matter how big of a mess it makes? That's how I get the stuff like the balloon and epoxy project, right?
Right.
If I'm thinking like a woodworker or a furniture maker, I might think, okay, these are the steps that you start with and that. If I remove all of that thinking and just being like, look around your shop, what's something that would be fun, and it's okay if it makes a huge mess and goes to shit. That, I think, is a permission structure that allows that day or that moment or that feeling of creativity to get a little more purchase onto you. And then you can say, kind of like psych yourself up and be like, okay, we might make a big mess today. We might waste some really good material, but we're gonna take a big shot at something. And so it's like hyping yourself up to take a little bit more risk within sort of boundaries that you wouldn't normally break.
Right. I've heard this concept before where limits and restrictions can enhance creativity. Like you can only build with 2x4s or whatever, but I've never heard, that's interesting, where like giving yourself a prompt or a new permission opens it up. It's kind of the other side of that coin.
Right. The limitation thing I think is real, right? Like putting constraints, like you gotta design something out of one sheet of plywood. It's a great prompt and it'll get you into being productive and you'll probably learn something. But really a lot of what creativity is perceived at in society is just people that remove some barriers for procrastination and they just got the thing out there and done. So it sounds weird to kind of say that you can kind of like brute force it. It's not always the best way, but it is a way. And I guess we're probably tailoring this conversation for the person that's not feeling particularly creative. The people that I woke up with that good feeling today, they're already in the shop or at the drawing board working on something. So of course it has to get tailored to perhaps the people that are a little bit in a creative deficit. I think there's some like little prompts, some little projects. You know, the kind of productive way to procrastinate until you have that feeling, I think is still learning like a technical skill. Like any technical skill you learn and then add to your arsenal is when the idea strikes, is you're just gonna be that much more ready and faster and get the stuff out there. But then in your sort of field, right, like in sort of like the video world, I mean, I look at people like Casey Neistat as not necessarily like, oh, he's the best technical editor, but he would do things in front of the camera with an idea of what he was gonna do in the edit and like write on the post-its or create these like little montages and these things that, you know, I hadn't really seen before in video. I'm sure people have done this kind of little things before, but that was something where I was like, oh, because, you know, I'm not super focused on the sort of video editing stuff. I just throw it up there. So I always thought the approach to video was much more like document what you do and share it like, you know, surveillance video. Yeah. But seeing that, you know, seeing sort of expression within the steps, both in front and behind of the camera, was like a time where I was like, oh, that's not how my brain works. I immediately associate it with him having this like special ability. But when I hear him talk about his life, it's also clear that he just was constantly experimenting with stuff and has a lot of technical skill. So I think it seems much more mysterious when you see it from the outside. But I guess that's, yeah, even in food, right? Like if I taste food from a chef, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. What isn't? But someone that really knows food will be like, oh yeah, you added vinegar to this.
Yes.
I may think that what I'm tasting is a result of creative inventiveness. And the more knowledgeable person next to me is just being like, no man, he added vinegar.
Yeah, great. And so like Casey had these benchmarks where he's like, I like Wes Anderson, or I like this or that, or I like Quentin Tarantino. And he kind of comes from traditional advertising and filmmaking, but he also had a really well-defined structure to what he was going to make every day. And because that structure was a foundation, the creativity happened on top of that.
Yeah, and I like him as a creative because often when I think the stereotype of creative people is like very flamboyant and kind of messy and extravagant people that are a little bit of a mess. But when I see Casey in his workspaces and stuff, it feels like an engineer. Like it feels meticulous, like the way he labels everything. When he does like handwrite with a Sharpie and the lettering looks, there's kind of a technical precision that feels very engineering. And I think that order allows him to really produce a lot of interesting stuff. So you're into the hemp woods and all that kind of stuff?
I think so. I've worked with you for 6 years, and sometimes I'll come to you and be like, Ben, have you seen this product? And you're like, yeah, let's see if it scales, or let's see if it's realistic. Like there's a lot of hype around stuff.
I'm always a real buzzkill when it comes to new materials. It's funny, it's like when I was in college and we were working on our first design build project for the solar decathlon, and we were picking out the materials. As a young designer, you think the materials you pick are so important. It's like, we got to use something new that no one else is using. We really wanted novel things. And so we were like, we're not going to use normal plywood. We're going to use bamboo plywood. We're not going to use typical countertop material. We're going to use this really cool acrylic recycled material. And we used recycled sugarcane board and blue jean insulation. What was interesting with one, these things are more expensive, not because they have to be, but often because they're just not produced in large quantities. And then two, there isn't as much repetition's been done with them in fabrication. So bamboo plywood, it's pretty nice, but it warps differently, it's machined differently, and you kind of have to develop a way to use it. The other thing too is that after a while, you may be the first person to use it, but if you're early using it and everyone else is like, yeah, I don't get it, and then eventually people get it, and then everyone uses it, no one cares that you were there first. No one cares that you saw the band at the small venue, right? So unless there's it's like a material that's going to have a massive competitive advantage and require some unique skill set to learn how to work well with, having access to a novel material isn't really a competitive advantage, I think, in design or making. If anything, I think people often get sidetracked and held back by it. Whereas I think what I'm more interested in isn't new materials, it's cheap materials, right? So like what we were talking about earlier with like the Douglas fir beams, I think there's a huge creative unlock when I sort of discovered how cheap they were, because it immediately says, oh, well, I can make cost competitive things that don't look like other things because this material is cheap. I don't know, what are some of the examples where you've seen someone use a material, whereas like the newness of the material changed the project?
So I've heard about this thing called Superwood, and they're treating the wood, like taking the lignin out, or taking everything except the lignin out, and then compressing it under hydraulic. And I heard it had big financial backing, and what it could do is basically have the strength of steel, but the aesthetic of wood. And so the difference between wood and steel as it relates to like a personal project and design choice is that you can get really thin lines. And that affects the silhouette and like the overall look of the project, but I guess with that wood look. So it seems interesting.
Superwood?
It's called Superwood. Had a big like $50 million backing, and they're releasing it in small batches to people on a wait list. And
yeah, look, it's eventually things change, right? Like it's so easy for something to get visibility, right? And people always want the grass is greener, new alternatives to something. So I'll be like scrolling around and I'll see something new. The way it's often advertised or content's created around it is being like, here's the problem with the old thing. Here's how the new thing solves that. In many cases, it makes like a very compelling argument. Bamboo plywood, when it was pitched to me 20 years ago, it was like, bamboo is one of the fastest growing materials. Trees grow slow. What if we could replace all plywood with bamboo plywood? Well, why hasn't that happened? It looks good. People like it. And it's happened in parts that's like easy to get bamboo cutting boards at Walmart or on Amazon, but it hasn't really gotten there. And I'm sure a ton of people have thrown money into it. I mean, if you could create a new competitive plywood company, like a lot of plywood's used and plywood's gone up in price.
Right.
So there are barriers that often don't make it into the content that make these things not as promising as what they've seen. So that doesn't mean that the Superwood won't be amazing and won't change the industry. It might, but I think our default should be when we see something new is that we say, this thing could be amazing, and that could give it a 1 out of 10 chances of surviving. So it's kind of like with like startups. Most of the people I've met who have startups are really smart, and most of them fail. And kind of how I think of it with a lot of these like new materials is a lot of them have a lot of potential, and most of them won't really hit scale.
Every time I see like a YouTube title or a headline that's like, this material will change everything, I just hear Ben in the back of my mind like, we'll see.
I'm such a buzzkill with that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, in construction you see it a lot because everything's trying to reduce labor. And I've seen so many quote unquote revolutionary construction systems like ICF, structural insulated panels, hay bale houses, and they all work and you can build legit buildings with all of them, but none of them have just revolutionized anything. I think like the revolutionary things are like onboard air compressors for nail guns, right? Or like how much better battery powered power tools have gotten, like not needing a generator on a construction site. Of all the tools that I've kind of used recently, I mean, even CNCs and 3D printers are like pretty impactful. Not maybe revolutionary or like lightly revolutionary. Now, they're both going to be part of manufacturing and fabrication forever, like and new versions of them will come out. So they definitely will stand the test of time, but they don't completely take over everything.
So I was trying to think of, is there a material that has caught your attention that's made you think, oh, that could like, it's not cost prohibitive, it does change my design choices?
Polycarbonate is the one that comes to mind for construction. So polycarbonate, it looks like acrylic, but acrylic doesn't do well in the sun. Whereas polycarbonate is a plastic that holds up well in the sun and it's very strong. It's what a lot of bulletproof glass is made out of. And it's often what your lenses in people's eyeglasses is often not glass, it's often polycarbonate. So it's a very hard plastic, very strong, and can be very clear, and unlike acrylic, does better in UV light. So that's why it's used in those double wall panels for greenhouses. It's also way less expensive and lighter weight than glass. So if you think about building houses, doors and windows are an expensive part of any building, right? Like your door and window package is a pretty good chunk of change. Most people, if they go, dude, you're not making my house with plastic windows. But if you think, wow, that greenhouse looks really cool, and you could have one little small real glass window, or you could have a whole wall of soft northern facing diffuse light from polycarbonate that, oh, by the way, is a way better insulator and less thermally conductive and way cheaper, then I think people would start to get interested. So polycarbonate is a material because it's already hit the masses and because it's inexpensive and because it can be used to replace expensive things like glass. It's something I'm excited about experimenting with. Now, I could never introduce it to a high-end home client. If I'm designing a house for a high-end client, I would never dream of doing it. I think where it would have a lot of appeal is in people that are constrained with the amount of square footage they're going to get for their new building. And so for like a workshop space, people building workshops and industrial spaces often don't have a lot of budget for really nice doors and windows.
Right.
So if I was building a shop or a studio for an artist, that's where I think it would have a lot of sway or a lot of interest. So let's say I was doing a 1,000 square foot studio for a painter out here in Joshua Tree. If I said, oh, your whole north wall can let in soft light and it's not going to add to your budget. That's, I think, a kind of thing where it would change the way I designed the space and it would save them money and give them more natural light.
Polycarbonate.
Yeah. So you made it to episode 2. No dinner party tonight because I got to get working on a commission that's due in a few days. But keep the questions coming. And if there's, if you're a longtime Homemade Modern watcher and you're curious about previous projects, ask about those as well. So we're going to continue to kind of play around with this format and figure out what works. So looking forward to what you think. Thanks. Bye.